It finally happened. Putin is panicking. A shocking video about his army has been leaked. Partisans have exposed Putin's defense industry. Rats are everywhere. The Ukrainian armed forces have done their job, powerfully striking the enemy with drones and artillery. Columns of equipment are in ruins. Footage of lightning-fast operations is blowing up the internet. All of this in our episode Hellpoint. The Russian army is facing serious problems from Nepal to Colombia. The geography of recruits in the Russian military now resembles a UN map. Putin is gathering mercenaries just to somehow patch up the holes at the front. Announcements, recruitment, promises, and new volunteers end up in the very heart of hell. So who's next on the Kremlin's global hunt for cannon fodder? Let's understand the plot.
They come from Asia. Boom, 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 boom.
Boom, 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 boom.
And from distant Africa.
Tell me again, where did you come from?
Senegal, Senegal, Senegal.
There are also those who were born nearby, but now fight against Ukraine for money.
Where are you from?
Vitebsk.
Belarus, right?
Yes.
And what did they pay you? What did they pay? What did they promise?
200.
200,000, I see. And did you get the 200,000?
Got it.
The Russians are actively recruiting mercenaries for their war of aggression.
As of this spring, we can say that there are about 48, well, as of today, we say close to 50. To be more precise, countries around the world from which mercenaries have come to fight as part of the Russian Federation against Ukraine.
Among them are not only Russian allies, CSTO bloc countries, and former members of the Soviet Union. Mercenaries are being sought everywhere, even in the most remote corners of the world.
We know about Russian residents from African countries, various ones, and it's hard for me to say which are more numerous. From Congo or, say, Mali, we just say Africans. We know about Nepalese, Indians. Recently, we've seen Chinese. We've seen Colombians, Cubans, residents of Latin American countries.
And they're also not opposed to recruiting citizens from countries they consider hostile to join the war.
We've even seen Americans and various Europeans as well. And of course, we're talking about dozens of people, not hundreds or thousands, dozens. But it's still a telling fact.
They're luring foreigners as always, with blood-soaked rubles and grand promises.
These are people who, first and foremost, are trying to solve their own financial problems. Although there are certain individuals who go for ideological reasons, supporting the Russian Federation. But there are very few of them.
And those foreigners who are already in Russia are being blackmailed and intimidated. Usually these are so-called labor migrants, who are mostly from Asia.
They start by putting pressure on the person if they are in Russia, they saying that they have violated some conditions of their stay in Russia. Now we're going to put you in prison. Now we're going to deport you and ban you from entering Russia. But you can fix this if you sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense. Plus, we'll even give you extra money on top of that.
By the beginning of 2025, we know by name at least 101 Syrians, 101 Serbs, 170 Turkmens, 1,028 Cubans, and 1,110 Uzbeks who are fighting on Russia's side. But how many mercenaries are still fighting in Russia's war against Ukraine remains unknown. Vlad Velichko, We Are Ukraine, United News Marathon.
For even more high-profile events from the life of Ukraine and the world, follow the Times of Ukraine Telegram channel. Only the latest news and verified information. See the link in the description below the video. You can't see them, but they're close by. Partisans operate behind enemy lines, systematically sabotaging Russian plans from within. All the information is already in the hands of the Ukrainian special services. While Moscow talks about control, someone in uniform is passing on coordinates or setting off panicking fireworks. The Russian army is starting to be afraid of its own shadow, and their defense industry is drowning in panic and distrust. Which missions have already been marked as successfully completed, and which ones will we find out about very soon? We'll talk about this in just a moment.
They are cutting off communications not only for military targets but also for other facilities, like in Saratov, the Moscow region, or Dagestan. They also destroy vehicles belonging to Russian soldiers and officers and conduct reconnaissance of Russian manufacturing sites. Recently, agents of the ATESH movement reported they carried out reconnaissance of the Russian enterprise Radar MMS in St. Petersburg. This company works for the enemy's military-industrial complex, in particular producing technologies for missiles. They also track the movement of Russian equipment and troops deep within the rear of the aggressor country.
This disrupts the enemy's plans, both in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine and far beyond its borders. So we find out what the rogue enemy is planning to do and try to, as I already mentioned, disrupt those plans.
All the information they gather is promptly relayed to the defense forces of Ukraine. And to make this possible, they often have to blend in and become insiders among strangers.
They don't just carry out partisan work behind enemy lines, they either enlisted in the Russian army or joined local government bodies. So essentially, the Russians see them as their own, and that's precisely why they don't restrict their access to information.
The partisan movement in Ukraine emerged back in 2014 when the Russians first entered Ukrainian territory. Our people searched for and transmitted information in the temporarily occupied territories. With the full-scale invasion, the number of partisans has grown, as has the area in which they operate. In particular, there are almost no safe places left on the territory of the Russian Federation.
The resistance movement, which is subordinate to the Special Operations Forces, has matured. It has become more experienced, it has become more aggressive, which is a good thing, and in fact, it has expanded its, let's say, capabilities, and as I already mentioned, onto the territory of the Russian Federation. And this also helps the relevant agencies, our special services, to eliminate, for example, well-known occupiers who are, among other things, involved in, for instance, missile strikes.
In addition, explosions at military facilities in Russia, including weapons manufacturing sites, command posts or depots, are also made possible thanks to the resistance movement. And our underground operatives have to work extremely carefully. Every operation is prepared in advance, taking into account all the difficulties and nuances. Everything is classified as secret, because the Russians are searching for members of the resistance movement, which means every operation is a risk to life.
They are trying to identify these people. That's why we always conduct briefings and all possible trainings on how to avoid such troubles. These are actually planned operations that are coordinated and carried out by many people. In other words, this is powerful work that almost always ends successfully.
And in addition to the moral pressure on the top leadership of the Russian Federation and the occupying army, this significantly impacts the military potential of the Russians. In particular, strikes on production facilities or warehouses reduce the number of missiles and drones that will be used to attack Ukraine. Fires on the railways create problems for delivering ammunition and equipment to the front. Most partisan operations behind enemy lines are not disclosed today for the safety of the people who are helping Ukraine. Very often these are civilian Ukrainians or citizens of other countries who independently offer their help in enemy territory. Vladislav Palivoda, We Are Ukraine, Marathon, United News.
The sniper's work is truly exquisite. Just one of his shots struck terror into half of Putin's army. One MTLB and its crew eliminated. The Russians tried to take revenge, launching new assaults again. The best fighters on the front line are showing there is no way through here. Motorcycles and Chinese ATVs are being blown to pieces. Putin's summer offensive is already noticeably faltering. More on this in our report right now.
One shot, one end. A Ukrainian sniper stopped an MTLB from 1,700 meters away. On one of the frontline directions, a story happened that sounds like a legend, but is confirmed by facts. A Ukrainian sniper armed with a rifle chambered for the 50 BMG cartridge accomplished the nearly impossible from a distance of 1,700 meters in poor visibility conditions. He disabled the MTLB with a single shot. The shot was taken from an awkward position, but the result impressed even the most experienced fighters. The vehicle stopped instantly and the enemy radio chatter erupted with screams. The driver's head was blown off. This shot was made by the most experienced sniper in the unit, who at first himself couldn't believe he had hit so precisely. This isn't a tall tale, but a real example of what our soldiers are capable of when they have the weapons, the skills, and cold determination. A Ukrainian legend has become reality. Meanwhile, even the Russian army can get tired. The relentless assaults are taking their toll. The actions of the Russians on the front lines hardly resemble an organized offensive, which indicates the exhaustion of the occupying army. According to Andriy Biletsky, the actions of Russian troops on the front are looking less and less like a planned offensive, which in turn indicates the exhaustion of the occupying army's forces. Despite the continued attacks on Ukrainian positions, it is already difficult to see any signs of an organized offensive campaign in these actions. Biletsky also recalled that in February of 24th year, the Russians began their offensive on Avdiivka with a huge numerical and technical advantage. According to him, at that time, well-trained manpower was deployed. There were massive stockpiles of ammunition and up to 100 guided aerial bombs were used daily. This offensive rolled forward like a steamroller for almost the entire year. However, at this point in his assessment, the situation has changed dramatically. Russia has suffered heavy losses both in equipment and in trained units. He notes that it is unclear whether the enemy has already launched the 2025 campaign or not, and this fact alone is already telling. According to him, Russia is losing valuable time during the favorable spring period. Currently, the occupiers' attacks appear disorganized and clumsy. On the battlefield, motorcycles and Chinese ATVs are increasingly being spotted instead of full-fledged armored vehicles. At the same time, the invaders' losses remain catastrophic. Biletsky concludes that Russia is noticeably exhausted and has lost a significant part of its offensive potential. Putin is placing great hopes on the summer offensive and is confident that it will be successful. Russia continues to strive for the complete occupation of Donbas as well as the seizure of the occupied parts of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions. However, at the negotiations in Istanbul, the Russian delegation went even further. Its representatives declared their intention to seize the Kharkiv and Sumy regions and then initiate the process of annexing them to the Russian Federation. At the same time, such threats are essentially devoid of any practical basis. The delegation was acting on the Kremlin's orders and tried to intimidate the Ukrainian side with the prospect of a large-scale summer offensive. How? The primary strategic targets were specifically identified as Sumy and Kharkiv. However, Russia simply does not have enough resources to carry out such plans. Moreover, even the possibility of consolidating control over the Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Donetsk and partially Luhansk regions is considered highly unrealistic. In order to launch a full-scale offensive operation in the Sumy and Kharkiv regions, Russia would have to mobilize up to 250,000 additional servicemen, even by the most conservative estimates. It is impossible to do this without weakening other sections of the front, especially considering that Ukrainian defense forces destroy up to 1,400 enemy personnel every day. This amounts to about 40,000 soldiers per month. A full-fledged army that Russia is unable to replenish with the necessary numbers and equipment. Meanwhile, Ukrainian defenses in these directions are organized effectively. The defenders have fortified their positions and are using unconventional tactics to strike at reserves moving toward the front line, as well as actively employing reconnaissance, missiles and drones. All available resources, from aviation to modern unmanned systems, are being used to neutralize any enemy threats both on the ground and in the air. The situation at the front is as follows. This is the 1181st day of the war. The front remains extremely tense. There were 175 combat engagements over the past day. The Russians carried out 78 airstrikes and dropped 124 guided aerial bombs, launched nearly 3,000 kamikaze drones, and conducted more than 5,100 artillery shellings. The main directions of the attacks are the east and south of Ukraine. The greatest pressure is on the Pokrovsk, Lyman and Kursk directions. Active assaults have also been recorded near Kharkiv, Kramatorsk, Toretsk and Kupiansk. Despite the intense pressure, the armed forces of Ukraine are holding the defensive line, delivering precise strikes on concentrations of enemy forces, command posts, equipment and artillery. The unmanned systems units of the 11th Brigade, named after Mikhailo Hrushevsky of the National Guard of Ukraine, carried out 320 fire strikes in the southern direction in just 1 week, destroying or damaging 248 locations of enemy personnel, 19 observation posts, 16 vehicles, 14 antennas, 6 mortars, 2 Tiger armored combat vehicles, 2 D-30 howitzers, ammunition depots, satellite communication systems, generators and more. Also in March and April on the Pokrovsk direction, FPV drone operators from the 55th Separate Artillery Brigade, Zaporizhzhia Sich, eliminated 91 occupiers with the same number wounded. Russia's losses over the past day amount to 1,040 personnel, 1 tank, 5 armored fighting vehicles, 118 UAVs and 88 pieces of equipment. Ukraine continues to wear down the enemy and confidently holds the defense. And that's all for today. Tune in tomorrow for the next...
Every Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
News update.
She wields a powerful cannon. With every clear command, a volley is already flying toward the enemy on the Zaporizhzhia section of the front. Cold calculation. The enemy infantry is swept away as if by hand after these strikes. Athena and her fighters are giving the audacious enemy a powerful roasting. They leave nothing of the enemy army but dust. And this is only the beginning. All Russian positions are already in their sights. How does a young woman manage to command a heavy artillery crew with such ease? We'll tell you more about this in just a moment.
Oh, I hear it. Don't go out. I hear it. Flying. No, no, no. It's coming. It's coming.
Enemy drones monitor the skies over Zaporizhzhia 24/7, searching for our artillery crews and equipment. Because of the overwhelming presence of enemy drones, the artillerymen have to camouflage themselves extensively. After every shot, the gun is hidden, since enemy drones are constantly flying up overhead. And from time to time, explosions ring out in the grove. An old Soviet cannon and a very young crew commander. This is Maria, call sign Athena.
Well, she's from 1976. I'm from 2000. There's quite a big age difference between us. So the cannon was born much earlier than I was.
She is 25, while the men she commands are over 40. However, the age difference doesn't get in the way. The crew fights as a team. They listen to Maria.
I asked the guys, let's do it better, let's do it right. Because she changes us. For example, I try to make sure they do less of the heavy work, since she's a girl after all.
Maria is originally from Slovyansk. As a child, she saw firsthand what the Russian world and occupation mean.
It's chaos inside, because none of us, well, no one prepared us for this, especially not the children. Not to mention that the parents weren't ready either. You know, parents, grandmothers, grandfathers, we weren't prepared, the younger generation, to face this. And there was an important line here, you know, because there were two camps. It's about not breaking.
She didn't break, went through training with the volunteers, learned how to operate drones, but eventually ended up in the artillery.
You know, when people ask, why did you decide to do it? What's the reason? What reason could there be? It's your country, your mother, she's in trouble. What is a child supposed to do in this situation? They have to protect her.
The 5-ton cannon is calibrated according to the coordinates and ready for action. Somewhere in the direction enemy infantry is advancing again, and it needs to be stopped now with something heavy, like a 152mm caliber.
Sometimes we don't even have time to camouflage ourselves, and the incoming shells are already 200 or 300 meters away. Well, we get warnings about drones. We fire when the sky is clear.
Yosik is aiming at the target, a former builder from the Kiev region, now a gunner. He had no military experience and had never been an artilleryman before the war.
Here, I'm basically self-taught, as they say.
Athena gives the order to engage, and the men's anthill is already in action. Someone carries the shell, another loads it into the barrel, and the third pulls the cord.
Honestly, I want to live to see the victory. I want to see the result of the time I have invested, of the life I have lived.
Narrator, Kabans, that's what they call the big calibers, are flying into the fields. The old cannon in the hands of men under female command is obedient and accurate.
Konstantin, at first it was very difficult because there's a difference in thought, age, and also the fact that she's a woman. But now we're on assignment, yes, it's already the 2nd month. Now everything has really settled down, so everything is working out clearly. Honestly, I don't see much of a problem with it at all.
Narrator, they stretch nets over the cannon, quickly camouflage it, and prepare new shells just in case. The crew hides because the enemy starts firing back, shelling the groves, and searching for the female artillery officer, Athena, and her warriors. They may not be young anymore, but they are skilled. Ruslan Yeremlyuk, Mikhailo Putieta, TSN, 1+1 Marathon, United News.
Tetiana Demuk. It appears in the sky and the equipment disappears. Silent, fast, and precise. The Horde drone has become a real nightmare for Russian convoys. It sees everything that moves. One flight and armored vehicles worth millions of dollars are burning in the air. The enemy tries to hide. That doesn't stop it. How does this cutting-edge drone manage to hunt targets right in the heart of the front line? And why do the Russians lose more every time? All the exclusive details are coming up in just a moment.
Darina Hotskalo, they prepare it for flight, checking all the wings and the tail. Then they place it on the catapult. A few minutes later, the drone is already hidden in the sky, flying toward the enemy. Now all control takes place underground.
Oleksiy Kshandzuk's number, the aircraft gains altitude and heads toward the Russians.
Darina Hutskalo. It is designed for reconnaissance and artillery adjustment. The UAV can stay in the air for about 3 hours and fly up to 150 HDI kilometers.
Oleksiy Kshandzuk, if everything we found in the air on the ground, and now, let's say, struck at that moment, I think we could have already ended this war. Well, in one flight we find 3 or 4 artillery pieces. Sometimes the movement of vehicles is just insane. Pickups, buggies, motorcyclists. But unfortunately, we don't have the means in such quantities.
Darina Hutskalo. The task for the UAV HOR crew right now is to look for artillery positions or enemy movements.
Serhiy, I'm the operator, so I handle the camera and the payload release. I control the camera. This is the pilot. He controls the UAV itself, its direction and how it flies. We also have 2 more people. You could say one is a driver and the other is a technician who handles the catapult.
Darina Hutskalo. This crew has worked as this lineup for 3 months.
Yehor was in infantry, wounded, ended up here.
Serhiy, I've been at war since 2021. Well, I was the driver of the Fury crew. Then things turned out in such a way that I became a member of the crew in this brigade.
Darina Hutskalo. All learned something new. Their commander is Abbott. For example, in civilian life, he was a dental technician.
Oleksiy Kshandzuk, I'm not sure I want to return to that field.
Darina Hutskalo. Now his task is to save the lives of the infantry. Because the faster they find the target, the more lives will be saved.
Oleksiy Kshandzuk, our task is to prevent as quickly as possible. For example, the enemy's Grad multiple rocket launcher system from reaching a firing position.
Darina Hutskalo. But the enemy skillfully hides their equipment. But on the Hora, there are both day and night cameras at the same time, which gives an advantage. The thermal imager allows you to see targets more clearly.
Oleksiy Kshandzuk, yes, now with the tree lines, it's hard to make out, for example, if something is standing in the shade covered with branches, well, it's covered with branches, though camouflaged with nets. It's hard to tell exactly what it is. They're not stupid either. They also have electronic warfare equipment, and they know that we're above them.
Darina Hutskalo. Right now, the fighters of the 68th Jaeger Brigade are positioned in the Pokrovsk direction and can clearly see how the enemy is burning city after city.
Oleksiy Kshandzuk, right now we're flying over Mirnohrad, the center of Mirnohrad. If you look over there, you can see not a single building is left intact, and most likely that's where the cabbies just struck.
Darina Hutskalo. Here at the front, even though Istanbul is far away, there is talk about negotiations.
Oleksiy Kshandzuk, no one knows when all this will end, of course, or how. It's good that at least there are some talks happening.
Darina Hutskalo. And here, it's clear the enemy doesn't let up.
Oleksiy Kshandzuk, to be honest, everyone really hopes that all this will end very soon. But well, everyone understands that it probably won't be that way.
Darina Hutskalo. From Donetsk region, Tetiana Demur, Mikhailo Holovnenko, and Oleksiy Kshandzuk. We are Ukraine. Marathon, United News.
Darina Hutskalo, that's all from me for now. I was with you, Darina Hutskalo. Even more intense news from the front in our next broadcast. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you